What if I told you that every time you vent your anger, shout it out, punch a pillow, scream into the void, you're not releasing it, you're reinforcing it? Let that sink in. We've been told for years that venting anger is healthy, that expressing rage is better than bottling it up, that letting it out gives us peace. But what if that's not only wrong, it's dangerous? What if venting isn't a release at all, but a rehearsal, a deepening of the mental grooves that make anger more accessible, more automatic, more destructive? In the next few minutes, I want us to step into a philosophical chamber of mirrors. I want to show you something you may have never seen before, how your mind might be training itself to stay angry even when you think you're healing. And I promise, by the end of this journey, you'll never see anger the same way again. Let's begin with a question most of us never ask. What is the function of anger in the mind? Anger is one of the oldest emotional tools in the human experience. Evolutionary psychologists suggest that it evolved to help us respond to threats, defend territory, protest injustice.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
It's fast, it's fiery, it's mobilizing. It's meant to do something. But here's the catch. In modern life, most of our threats are not physical. They're psychological, emotional, symbolic. And yet the brain doesn't know the difference. You get cut off in traffic, anger. Someone disagrees with you online, anger. Your partner forgets to text back, anger. But these are not tigers. But your brain reacts like they are. And when you give yourself permission to vent, to let it out, to unload, you're not disarming the anger, you're practicing it. You're building a neural pathway, a groove, a shortcut. And the next time you're even slightly irritated, your brain remembers that groove. It says, I know what to do. Rage and explode. And it gets easier and faster and more automatic. So here's the deep philosophical question. If every expression of anger makes you better at being angry, what kind of person are you becoming? Let's go deeper. Imagine you're building a house. And every time you feel anger, you pour concrete into the foundation. That's venting. You think you're clearing space, but you're actually laying more stone, more permanence. Venting anger is like lifting weights at the gym, except the muscle you're building is resentment. You become stronger at blame, more skilled at outrage, more comfortable in chaos. And over time, that becomes your identity. Have you ever met someone who's always angry? Who walks into a room and finds something to be offended by within 5 minutes? That person didn't wake up like that. They trained for it, one outburst at a time. So let's challenge another belief. Does bottling up anger really cause more harm than venting it? Now, I'm not saying we should suppress emotions. That's dangerous too. Repression leads to fragmentation, illness, disconnection. But there's a difference between repression and transcendence. Repression is, I'm angry, but I'll pretend I'm not. Transcendence is, I see the anger, I understand it, but I choose not to become it. That's what the Stoics taught. That we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius didn't scream into pillows. He observed his own mind. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." We've lost that art. because we've been sold the idea that self-expression, in its rawest form, is always healing. But here's the truth. Raw expression without awareness is not healing, its habit. And habits shape identity. So who are we becoming when we keep venting our anger? More importantly, who are we teaching others to become? And think about children. When a child watches an adult yell, explode, blow off steam, what are they learning? They're learning that anger is loud, that anger is powerful, that the way to solve emotional discomfort is to project it outward. They're learning to displace pain, not to understand it. And that's the start of a society addicted to rage. And a culture built on reaction. A generation more fluent in outrage than in inner peace. But let's flip it. Let's imagine a different model. Imagine a person who feels anger rise, but instead of venting, they pause. They breathe. They investigate. They ask, what is this really about? They notice the story forming in their mind, the judgment, the blame, the narrative of injustice, and instead of feeding it, they witness it. They allow the emotion to pass like a storm without building a temple to it. That person becomes a master of their inner world. They become less reactive, more present, more free. And here's the paradox. That person still feels anger, but they're no longer ruled by it. They don't need to scream it out to know it's real. Because real strength isn't in venting. It's in containing without collapsing, in holding the fire without burning the house down. Now let's pull in neuroscience. Studies have shown that venting anger, whether through yelling, punching objects, or aggressive expression, doesn't decrease anger. It increases it. It raises heart rate, prolongs physiological arousal, deepens emotional tension. One study from Iowa State University found that people who punched a punching bag while thinking about someone who made them angry actually became more aggressive afterwards, not less. But why? Because the brain learns. When you reward anger with action, the brain tags it as useful. It's the same mechanism behind addiction. You feel discomfort, you act, you get relief. The brain remembers the pathway, reinforces it. And before you know it, anger becomes your go-to strategy for feeling powerful. But power built on reaction is not real power. It's fragility wearing a mask. So here's the next deep question. What would happen if you learned to feel anger without expressing it? Not suppressing, not ignoring, just being with it. Like watching a thunderstorm from a safe distance. You don't run into the lightning. You don't try to shout it away. You observe, you listen, you wait, and eventually the sky clears. Because all emotions are temporary unless we attach to them. Venting is a form of attachment. It's saying, this emotion deserves a voice, a spotlight, a stage. But maybe what it really deserves is silence. Not because it's bad, but because it's sacred. Because anger is a messenger. It's trying to show you something. A boundary that's been crossed. A need that's unmet. But if you vent it before you listen, you kill the message. You burn the bridge between your emotion and your awareness. And that's the real tragedy, because anger, when understood, can be alchemy. It can become assertiveness, clarity, conviction, but only if we don't rush to express it, only if we're brave enough to feel it fully without acting it out. So here's the challenge. Next time you feel the fire rise, don't vent. Don't shout. Don't text. Don't post. Just pause. Ask, what is this anger trying to show me, and what happens if I don't obey it? Because maybe the real strength is not in letting it out. Maybe the real strength is in letting it pass through you without owning you. We live in a culture that not only tolerates anger, it celebrates it. Think about it. We idolize the rebel, the dissenter, the one who tells it like it is, even if that means verbal destruction. Social media algorithms reward outrage, but our politicians fuel entire movements on indignation. And our most viral content. It's often someone losing their mind publicly, dramatically, unapologetically. We've made anger a currency, and that's not a metaphor. Emotionally charged content, especially angry content, actually increases engagement, views, shares. It keeps us swiping. It keeps us watching. It keeps us addicted. So here's a brutal question. Are you genuinely angry, or have you been trained to be? This is the rage illusion. The idea that anger is empowerment. That if you're not furious, you're not awake. That if you're calm, you're complicit. And that passion must roar. But let's get something straight. Anger is not the same as clarity. You can be clear without being cruel. You can be powerful without being loud. You can be deeply committed to justice, truth, and change without being consumed by rage. But society doesn't reward that. It rewards spectacle. And anger is spectacle at its finest. It's dramatic. It's intense. It's sharp-edged and quick to take sides. It gives you identity. I'm the hurt one. I'm the one who was wronged. I'm the one who sees what others don't. And that identity becomes intoxicating because it gives you something to stand on, even if it's burning you alive. So what happens when we build a culture on this illusion? We create a generation that confuses agitation with action, that believes shouting is truth-telling, that thinks emotional chaos is bravery. And we lose the ability to sit quietly with complexity, hold two truths at once, and to respond instead of react. We become emotionally fragile but outwardly explosive. And that's a dangerous combination. It means we snap quickly but recover slowly. We live in a constant state of emotional inflammation. And over time, that inflammation becomes a worldview. We start seeing threats where there are none. We start interpreting silence as disrespect. We start assuming the worst of others and ourselves. Because when anger is your default setting, the world becomes a battlefield. Which means you're always armed, always on edge, always one trigger away from eruption. And here's the dark irony. Anger makes us feel powerful, but it actually shrinks our awareness. Neuroscience shows that anger narrows our focus. It activates the amygdala, the fear and threat center, and deactivates the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, empathy, long-term planning. So even as we feel righteous and awake, we're actually less conscious, less wise, less capable of understanding nuance. Let me ask you something piercing. When was the last time your anger led to a truly transformative insight, not just a reaction, not just a blow-up, but a genuine evolution of your inner world? It's rare, because anger tends to recycle. It loops, it feeds on itself, and worse, it spreads. Anger is contagious. When one person vents, it pulls others in. It creates emotional resonance. You don't just hear anger, you feel it. You absorb its energy. And that's how entire communities, families, organizations, even nations get hijacked by emotional chaos. A single unchecked outburst becomes a culture. And soon we're all speaking in the language of blame. But what if there's another way? What if we could reclaim our inner peace, not by suppressing anger, but by disarming it? By not giving it the microphone every time it shows up. Because here's what the great spiritual and philosophical traditions agree on: anger is a teacher, but only if you don't let it drive the car. Buddhism teaches that anger is one of the 3 poisons of the mind. Christian mystics saw wrath as a barrier to divine union. Stoics warn that anger clouds reason and weakens the soul. Even modern psychology recognizes that uncontrolled anger is deeply correlated with anxiety, depression, cardiovascular disease, and impaired relationships. So why do we still glorify it? Because it gives us something fast. It gives us a rush, a sense of control, a target, a target, a temporary high. But like all highs, it crashes. And what's left is the wreckage of trust, relationships, peace, and often health. Let's get real practical. What happens to your mind when you keep venting anger? You train it to scan for threats, to assume the worst, to ruminate. You become hypersensitive to perceived slights. You lose the ability to pause between stimulus and response. In other words, you become emotionally enslaved. And what happens to your body? Your nervous system stays on high alert. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. Your heart races. Your muscles tighten. Your immune system weakens. The cost of that? Chronic stress, insomnia, inflammation, disease. So the next time someone says vent your anger, ask them, at what cost? At the cost of your peace, your health, your relationships, your clarity? Because it's not just about the moment. It's about the path you're carving in your mind. Every vented rage is a vote for who you become. So who are you voting for? The version of you that reacts or the version that reflects? The version that explodes or the one that evolves? Because here's the wild, liberating truth: you don't have to become your anger. You can witness it without worshipping it. You can feel it without feeding it. You can say, I see you, I hear you, but I don't serve you. That's not suppression. That's sovereignty. And it's rare, because it's quiet. It doesn't trend. It doesn't scream. But it changes everything, because when you stop letting anger define your voice, your identity, your power, you make room for something deeper: discernment, compassion, wisdom. And these aren't soft traits. They're superpowers, because they allow you to see clearly where others lash out blindly. They allow you to respond with grounded presence where others spin in narrative. They allow you to lead not with force, but with gravity. So here's your next challenge. For the next 48 hours, observe your anger like a scientist. Don't vent, don't suppress, just watch. Where does it come from? What story is it telling? What need is it protecting? And what would happen if, instead of shouting, you listened? Because maybe anger isn't here to be released. Maybe it's here to be redeemed.